Okay, we're live. I just got to take us live on Instagram. Give me a second. But we are live, Nana Linda, if you want to go ahead.
Greetings. Welcome wherever you are. We so appreciate you joining us. Hopefully, you're nice and warm and cozy. We are so happy to be here today to talk about Zola, creating all the Zola we can possibly create this Monday, this first Monday of Black History Month. And we have a wonderful guest with us again. Professor Tony Browder is with us to share his new book. We're so excited. And I'm going to let the rest of our panelists introduce themselves. And Professor Browder, do you want to introduce yourself? Although I'm sure everybody knows exactly who you are.
Well, I'm Tony Browder, pleased to be here, Washington, D.C., by way of Chicago, writer, historian, and lover of all people and all things African.
Absolutely.
And I am Harvey Linder. I'm a clinical psychologist.
Colin, you have a long keyboard.
Am I going? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can go.
I'm so sorry. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Colin Bird. I am grateful to be here as a member of DC ABPsi chapter, which Dr. Hickson leads. I'm also a grad student in counseling at Bowie State University, where I'm also a full-time employee. I'm currently employed as the program coordinator for the Center for Research and Mentoring of Black male students and teachers. Just grateful to share space with you all.
Glad to have you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Hickson, the chair of DC ABPsi and ABPsi Public Relations. Super excited that Colin can join us, as well as Professor Browder. William had to do some work with our baby, so he could not join today, but we're excited to have this conversation. So I'll pass the mic to Professor Browder.
You're passing the mic to me? All right. Well, I want to ask Colin a question. So what's the work that you're doing with young men in the public school system? Can you explain it to us and what you found some of your challenges to be? I'm curious.
Okay, I love being on the hot seat right out the gate. So thank you for your question, Dr. Browder. Basically, the main thing that we do is we try to develop boys into men. Sorry to make a reference to the music group, but we really try to do that. And we do that really at every critical stage of development all the way through higher education. So we've had people come through this program and ultimately get their doctorates, people getting their masters. But where we really try to start is when they're young. So we've done partnerships with school systems where we work with middle school boys. But the bread and butter, the group that I'm a part of is we develop the next generation of Black male educators by supporting them through student scholarships here at Bowie State. And then we have various programming to try to develop them as Afrocentric young men that will lead the next generation of boys into a manhood rooted in love for the people and commitment to the people. And so that was really the vision of our founder, Dr. Davis. And that's kind of what we try to carry on to this day.
Right.
As you might imagine, last year, a lot changed around our financial framework because we do get a lot of support from the federal government. But as long as we got dollars, we're going to keep trying to make it happen.
So one last question for you. What's the biggest challenge you find as you attempt to work with these young men? What issues are they bringing to you?
I think that the biggest issue, and our founder is very focused on bringing a critical race theory lens into Black pedagogy. In fact, he has a book right here I could show when I get a second, and it's literally about critical race theory and math education. And so his idea is that there is racism systemically embedded in public education in the United States. And so the short answer to your question is that I think the biggest thing that he would say and that we would probably say is we're dealing with a lot of underprepared young men when they get to college for the academic demands of higher education. And so what we're having to do is accelerate their development so they can catch up, and then ultimately, perform at the level that they need to graduate, but also to be prepared to set their horizons a little higher. So, one of the things that I try to talk to them about is, although you're trained to be educators, I want you to think about leadership. So I'm trying to expose them to folks that are not just teachers, but principals and folks with doctorates, so that whatever they came in thinking that was going to be their ceiling, that they raised that ceiling.
Great. Thank you. Linder, did you you look like you wanted to say something.
I'm actually talking with my speaker muted. And thank you so much, Colin, for sharing that information. We didn't know. You have quite a chapter going there, don't you, Dr. JoJo? I would like, though, for us to hear a little bit more about your book, your new book that's out.
Sure. Thank you. Well, my new book is titled A Browder Perspective. My 50-year journey to enlightenment is the third installment of my Browder File series. My very first Browder File was released 37 years ago yesterday. From the Browder File, 22 essays on the African American experience. And when that book was first released, nobody knew Tony Browder, but everyone knew Asa Hilliard, who had written the introduction to that book. And having Asa's name on that book has helped to make that book a bestseller. And it's been a perennial bestseller for the past 37 years. And one of the reasons why that book has done so well is because it addresses the needs that Colin raised about Black children, not just Black boys, Black children not being prepared for school, not understanding or appreciate the value of an education. And the primary reason why children aren't prepared for school is because their parents weren't prepared for school. Their parents don't understand what it's going to take in order to build strong children. And to go back to your Boys to Men reference, I want to reference Frederick Douglass, who said it's better to raise strong Black boys than to repair broken men. And so it begins at home. It begins with the foundation. And with my first book, From the Browder File, in Asa's introduction, Asa listed the things, the reasons, several reasons why Black people fail to work together in unity and harmony. And Asa, being the educational psychologist that he was, clearly articulated problems that we had 37 years ago, problems that we are currently experiencing today, and problems that we will continue to experience for the next 100 years until we address these problems head on. Critical race theory is an analysis of the problem, but critical race theory, from my perspective, is us dealing with the problems that white folk have created that we find ourselves in. My position has always been, white folk have always been racist. They're always going to be racist, and we know that. So what do we do in order to shore ourselves up so that no matter where we move in society, no matter where we move in the world, we are whole and complete in ourselves? We don't need white folk for validation. We validate ourselves. And that's a lesson that unfortunately is not taught in many of our institutions today, particularly our HBCUs today. It's not taught. And if we think in terms of what this month represents, this month is Black History Month. Saturday, the 7th, represents the 100-year anniversary of Carter G. Woodson founding Negro History Week. And what we should remember in Woodson's creation of Negro History Week is not just his writing The Miseducation of the Negro in 1933, which folk talk about, but something that's I think even more important is that Woodson, who was the second African-American to receive a PhD from Harvard, said in an article he wrote for Garvey's Negro World that it took him 20 years to get Harvard out of his brain. So in the process of dealing with miseducation, Dr. Carter recognized that he himself had been miseducated, and that many of the institutions that he sought to work with were institutions that were created in order to perpetuate the continued miseducation of Black folk. So Woodson decided to remove himself from those institutions and organizations and created his own organization and dedicated the rest of his life to creating vehicles and platforms and opportunities for us to re-educate ourselves. And we still find ourselves in that fight to this very day. So my position was, once I became aware personally of the extent of miseducation, and I did not become aware of that until after I graduated from Howard in 1974 and realized that I was not prepared to step out into a world that was racist from head to toe, right? And that it wasn't until the following year, 1975, when I met a brother, an Akan priest in DC, Nana Kwabena Brown, who held a class in African spirituality. And after attending that 7-week course in African spirituality, I now had a grounding upon which I could see myself as a person of African ancestry living in the United States. And I've been able to build on that foundation to do all the things that I've done throughout my career. Hence the title of my current book, A Browder Perspective, my 50-year journey to enlightenment. So that journey has led me on a path of self-sufficiency and self-determination. One of the things that I'm proudest of is the fact that I have not worked for anybody. I've worked for myself for the past 47 years. And when you work for yourself, it creates a different mindset, a different mentality, a different understanding of who you are and what you have the capacity to do. And so for people today, for the issues that we're facing today, as you mentioned, Colin, the existence of your organization has been threatened over the past year with the ascension of this Nazi regime and the erasure or the attempts to erase many of the accomplishments that we've made since, let's just say, 1965 with the passage of the Voting Rights Act. So white folk are now doing in the open what they've always done. And many of our people are acting surprised because they never fully understood what we've been dealing with all along, right? And so what I have found is that our only solution, our only recourse is to be ourselves as African people living in America or wherever we may find ourselves. That's our foundation. That's our base. That's been our saving grace. And when we understand that, and when we live and walk that path and model for young people what it means to know yourself, what it means to be a proud African man, a proud African woman, and not succumb to all of the traps that are laid out here by this nation, then we can raise multiple generations who stand on the shoulders of ancestors who have always made ways out of no way. And we don't have to struggle as we have been socialized to believe that we must struggle in order to make a way out of no way or to deal with racism. We don't have to struggle. You know, my philosophy has been, if you're struggling, you're doing it wrong. You know, we live in a world, we live in a universe of limitless bounty. And once you understand that, once you understand who African people were, what African people have done, what we've always done, our strength is in being our best selves and not trying to imitate our oppressor. Our oppressor will never give us the tools we need to liberate ourselves. That ain't their job. That's their downfall if they do.
And they don't have them.
They don't have them.
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. So, you know, it's so critically important. So the writings that I've done over the years have been writings of self-discovery that I'm sharing with others in my community so that they can understand the options that we have available to us. So that was Browder File 1. Browder File 2 was published 35 years ago, Survival Strategies for Africans in America, 13 Steps to Freedom. So it's a matter of not just talking about who we are, what we've done, but laying out a specific path on how to do these things on a daily basis. So it's about practical application of historical knowledge so that it becomes you. It's not theoretical, it's practical. And this third installment, again, is designed to provide a summary or an overview of the path that I've been on for these past 50 years, again, reinforcing some of the same concepts and ideas, but giving folk a clear idea and a clear foundation of what it is we can do and must do in these critically important times. Dr. Edward Nichols was on the radio last Thursday doing an interview. And, Nichols being Nichols, he's always sharing information that wakes us up. And one startling piece of information that he shared is that within this past year, over 33,000 Black people, Black federal employees have lost their jobs. And Prince George's County, which has held the record since the 1970s, as being the largest majority minority county in the United States, the wealthiest county or county of Black people in the world, the best educated community of Black people on the planet. As of last year, with all the loss of federal jobs, Prince George's County has had a 20% increase in mortgage foreclosures. So many of our people have been wedded to a system that has not been designed to create us to sustain us, right? And so as a result of putting all of our eggs in that basket, when the rug is pulled out from under us, we fall, we tumble hard because we buy into a system that was never created for us or never meant to support us. And so in this time of dire need, there are more Black people now beginning to look to ourselves as providing the means of our salvation. Many Black organizations are beginning to look to ourselves as opposed to other institutions to support us. We've got the resources, we got the talent. We just have to have the commitment to love ourselves, to know ourselves, and to love ourselves enough to do the things that we've always done. Another important fact that I want to share, and then I'll be quiet and take some questions, or we can pivot and do some other things. I also want to acknowledge the sudden and tragic loss of Dr. Charles Finch. We lost Dr. Finch last month on the 17th of January, and Dr. Finch was one of the last of our giant Kemetic scholars. It was Dr. Finch who I first met in September of 1984 at the Nile Valley Conference, where Finch, in conjunction with Asa Hilliard and Ivan Van Sertima, organized this 4-day event, which transformed my life and gave me a vision for what I wanted to do with my life. So with the passing of Dr. Finch, there is a void that must be filled. And we had here in DC, where we had a really strong relationship with Finch. I spoke with Dr. Finch's wife, Ellen, and she agreed to allow us to host a 40-day Ascension commemoration for Dr. Finch on the 26th of February, which is the 40th day after his passing. It is the day in which he officially becomes an ancestor. So as we've been talking about this event, I am often met with blank faces, blank stares on the faces of Black folk who ain't never heard of a 40-day, who don't know what that's about, who are befuddled at this idea. And that reality takes us back to how fundamentally separated from our power we have been. And I was talking to Dr. Nichols offline about this the other day, and Dr. Finch was a Catholic, a Roman Catholic, and was buried 3 days after he died in a Roman Catholic with Roman Catholic rites, but he was buried in a green burial. He was buried in a shroud in earth, and that was it, no casket, nothing, because of his understanding of the importance of ecology and him wanting to be in alignment with certain African traditions, even though he was Roman Catholic. So as I explained this to Dr. Nichols, who is also a devout Catholic, who goes to Mass every day, and I was explaining to Dr. Nichols what the 40-day represents, and explaining the different passages. And I'll just share this briefly with you all. Within traditional African society, from the Nile to the Niger, there's this understanding that we are more than just our physical bodies, that our physical bodies are comprised of various components, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And when the body dies, the spirit or the soul reviews its life over the course of 40 days. And it reviews its life in preparation for the 40th day, where in Kemetic or Nile studies, the soul is led into the hall of the double ma'at, where they must declare their innocence, as their heart, which represents the seat of the soul, is weighed opposite the feather of ma'at on the scale of ma'at, and they must then declare their innocence by reciting the 42 declarations of innocence. And if that soul is true to those 42 declarations, then that soul is found ma'at keru, true of voice, and that soul can ascend into the afterlife or the ancestral realm. That is when that the deceased officially becomes an ancestor after 40 days. And once they become an ancestor, they, as ancestors, are accessible to the living. And I can speak to this with a great deal of clarity and a great deal of passion as a result of the 15 years that I spent excavating tombs on the west bank of Luxor, particularly the tomb of this 25th dynasty priest, Karakamen. And within his tomb, in the westernmost part of the tomb, is that spirit door, what we call the spirit door, what Egyptologists refer to as a false door. And that is a door carved into a wall, surrounded by images and texts in which priests bring offerings to the spirit door and petition the spirit of the ancestor to come from the spiritual realm into the physical world to interact with the living. That is the concept, the same concept that we saw cinematically represented by Ryan Coogler in the Black Panther films, when T'Challa, once he was crowned the new Black Panther, drank the heart-shaped herb and then went into the ancestral realm and met with his father. And one of the telltale elements of that scene, one of the most important elements in that scene, is when T'Challa is talking to his father and is still grieving the loss of his father. And he tells his dad that I'm not ready. And his father mistakenly thinks that he means that he's not ready to be king. And the father says, have I not prepared you to replace me? I've shown you this. I've shown you this. I have prepared you. And T'Challa says, with tears in his eyes, Dad, I'm not ready to be without you, right? And then his father says the most important line in the film: any parent who has not prepared their children for their death has failed as a parent. Have I ever failed you? And his son said, no, Baba, you haven't. So it was that confirmation with his ancestors that healed him and made him whole so that he can come back and do his work. That relationship with the ancestors is real. It is thousands, those rituals and those practices are thousands of years old. And they affirm our humanity. They affirm our link to the ancestors. So what our oppressor has very successfully done is to present our lifeline, our spiritual lifeline, is something that is pagan. It's something that is taboo. It's something that is anti-religious. And you will not go to heaven. You will not have a relationship with God or Allah or Jehovah if you engage in these pagan activities. That is done intentionally to disempower us. So the purpose of the 40-day ceremony for Dr. Finch is to help his soul make it through these 40 days and to help lift him up so that as an ancestor, he is accessible to us, as is ancestor Asa Hilliard and Francis West Welsing and Amos Wilson and all of those Jegna, all of those soldiers, cultural warriors who have put their lives on the line while they were living to leave us with a way to know ourselves and to become successful men and women in whatever endeavor we chose. And now that they are our ancestors, we have a stronger connection to them than ever before. And that's not mumbo jumbo. That's not hocus pocus. That's not voodoo. That's not hoodoo. That is our lifeline, and it always has been our lifeline. So
That's kind of what we've been devoted to, Tony, as Black psychologists, particularly in the radical school.
mhm.
As Woodson said, if you control the way people think, you control the people. You don't have to relegate them to an inferior status. They will seek it for themselves. And the truth of the matter is, that's what we see happening. And I was really struck by your first comment relative to Woodson talking about having to spend 20 years getting Harvard out of his mind or his body,
Mhm.
and also the kind of experience that we see so very clearly. One of the things that keeps us trapped is our believing in Harvard, our
Yes.
believing that we need that kind of what we say labeling to give us privilege to get us to the life we think we want, and going deep into that psyche that allows us to harbor that, even though in the face of what's going on today, we ought to see very clearly none of that really means a whole lot. But you were able to see it in some ways. I think you were suggesting you were able to see it so deeply because you kind of circumvented that orientation, the formal education, if you will, and took the route of self-education. And self-education is possible even within a formal educational system, which has been my experience.
Mhm.
I pursued a degree in clinical psychology, but it was clear to me they have no clue about mental health, and
Mhm.
that we needed to create a psychology. And this is totally Asa Hilliard. Why would you think that someone who has seen you in the way Caucasians have seen us, their psychology could do us any good? And so it's such a pleasure to hear you talk about that, because you have had the experiences that verify what we've been talking about for probably a good 50 years now. And, and it's beautiful to see that many of the things that we've come to. So, for example, with the 40 days, I've always associated that with the Yoruba Ifa tradition. I
Mhm.
didn't know in Kemet they also did 40 days.
Mhm.
Or
Yes.
I've also known that for most people acknowledging African ancestry and coming from that wisdom tradition, there is no death.
Exactly.
It's just the recycling. And so I loved hearing you talk about uh, that new way of thinking, which would be new to many people today, but also really powerful is the reality that since that is the case, based on the wisdom tradition of African deep thought, whose records we can trace back to the beginnings of the earliest recordings, we can help people who've made their transition in the
Mhm.
spirit realm here
Mhm.
on earth. And I think that's something that many people find very astounding. And we always think the other way. Oh, they can help us. Well, yes, they absolutely can and do, but we can also help them in their spiritual journey. So you just said so many things. I'm just going to be quiet.
Well,
But
let me comment to something you just said in terms of there is a term in Kemet called the Rehemi Misu, which means the repetition of the birth. And that's a confirmation of the fact that there is no death. And so what that encourages us to do, what it frees us up to do is to see our life not just as one life, one lifetime, but a series of lifetimes that are strung together by a soul that has had all of these experiences throughout various lifetimes. And so a person living today who is able to mine those memories, tap within that soul, can access knowledge from a previous lifetime. And the person who does that is referred to in contemporary terms as a genius. What does the genius mean? It means someone who has tapped into their genetic memory. See, something that I never forget, we had in 1989, we sponsored in DC the third annual Melanin Conference with Francis Welsing, Richard King, Wade Nobles, Asa Hilliard, Naeem Akbar, you name it, the cream de la cream of Black scholarship. Black Intellectual Scholarship, African Centered Scholarship, African Spirituality. And I remember Richard King saying something during that conference that stayed with me. Richard, who, like Dr. Wilson, talked a lot about melanin, but Richard focused a lot on ancient Kemet, specifically the 18th dynasty. And he also delved deep into the Kemetic concepts of the soul and the spirit. And he said that, and this is 1989, that scientists and geneticists know that you can understand the power of the genes, and that you can take the genetic material from a person's skin or their hair or their fingernail and replicate another person, because all of that knowledge is embedded in their genes. But Richard said what they don't talk about is the fact also embedded in the genes are the memories of all of their ancestors, right? And that's the genetic memory that the folk are low to really talk about or acknowledge. But I'll never forget, I guess about 10 to 12 years ago, Patricia Newton, who is also a psychiatrist, she called me up one day, and, she was working at Johns Hopkins, and said, Tony, we have found the physical place in the brain where genetic memory resides. John Hopkins had been studying a Jewish patient who was having psychotic episodes where he was literally reliving the experiences of his grandmother, who was a Holocaust survivor. So as these physicians were examining him, doing MRIs or using some other technology to examine the area of his brain that was activated when he was having these episodes, they found this small organ within the brain, which they referred to as the red nucleus. And that is the organ within the brain where genetic memories reside. And she said, she described the red nucleus as being layered like the membranes of an onion. And each layer is an ancestral memory, right? So this is something that is known in Yoruba traditions, it's known in Akan traditions, it's known in Nile Valley traditions. They've always known this information, and they developed the means by which you could communicate with those ancestors, so that, as you said, Sister Linda, we can help them and they can also help us. And one has to be trained in this knowledge so that you would be able to tap into the right ancestral memory and be of service to that person. And Finch, being a emergency room physician, trained as an emergency room physician, was also steeped in various West African spiritual traditions. And, I got to know Charlie very well over the past 12, 13 years. And he would share with us some of his experiences in West Africa when he's dealing with West African healers. And two experiences that he shared with us, a small collective of folk, well over a decade ago, is that, and he identified the person who did these rituals. And Patricia Newton, who was with him at one of these occasions, verified it, that he literally saw a man turn water into wine, right? And described that process, right? And he also described another instance where this same person, who's also a priest, but who was also a trained physician, cut the head off of a chicken and threw the head in one direction and threw the body in another direction. And, a chicken with his head cut off can run around for a time. But he said that they witnessed that chicken, the body running around until it found his head and reconnected his head and continued to walk around the compound while they were there. So there are things that we may refer to in Western society as magic, as we just don't believe them because they don't fit within our concept of science. It can't be counted, it can't be measured, But we also know that there are people who have knowledge of the physical and the transphysical and can do things which we refer to in the Western world as magic, but what Asa referred to as high science, right?
They're one, aren't they?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So we have the physical material, the spiritual material bifurcated in the Euro-Western mindset.
Mm-hmm.
In the wisdom tradition, there's one manifest in such brilliant and beautiful ways. And when we can come to realize that, then we can actually carry out the same thing our ancestors carried out. And we're going to need to develop the capacity to do that, given what we're confronted with today. And all the people you talked about, I've lived long enough to know, well, that as a consequence, it's a beautiful thing to have those ancestors.
Absolutely.
Just back up. We got some spiritual forces behind us, just waiting to help us. And we have to prepare ourselves to support them as well. It's an interaction that continues and continues. And one of the challenges I think that makes people so skeptical about the spiritual aspect is that even the Euro-Western science, air quotes, makes it so, well, we need to pinpoint the place in the body where this happens. Well, no, you just pinpointed a place in the body, but quantum science tells us there's no such point. But this depends on the perspective you're taking. You look at it from this perspective, it's a wave. You look at it from this perspective, it's a point. It's energy. And so as we develop the capacity to interrogate whatever energy field within which we find ourselves and open ourselves up to another way of seeing the world in which our assumption about reality is not limited to what our five senses inform, but rather engages an energy field that really has no limits. I'm reminded of Marcus Garvey. There's so many who came before us who've been clear about the path and the way and what we need to do. And so one of the things that we're excited about today is having you as our guest, because you're teaching truth, speaking truth that many people know, but many people don't know. And the opportunity to provide the education so that we can now penetrate the veil, so to speak. We can now see, oh, this is really about Ma'at. This is really about truth. This is about the realization that with creative life force, particularly if you're interested in Nebuchadnezzar, that divine force, the totality, the pathway is moral. It's a moral order. Truth. With truth, we can get peace and justice and righteousness and harmony and balance and all those wonderful things. And what I'm seeing too, and I wanted to ask you about, is clearly we've been talking for quite some time now, many of us, about the return of the divine feminine.
Yes.
And I'm sure in your studies you have been exposed to this. Would you please share what you could relative to that?
Sure. And in talking about that, I really want to bring forth the name of Charles Finch again, because over the last decade at least, Charles had given many presentations where he talked about the return of the cosmic mother, the divine mother. He often referred to her in the West African term Mami Wata, but she's also known as Yeminya. And it's this spirit, this cosmic spirit that is the source of it all. And so what I have come to understand very recently, and I'm beginning to broaden and deepen my understanding. One of the things that I came to realize as I was writing my latest book is that I've been studying this information for quite some time, almost all of my life, but I'm now at a point where I'm beginning to understand what I thought I knew, right? I acquired a lot of information, but now I'm getting understanding, right? And that helps me to see very clearly what it is that I've always had access to. And that clarity helps pave the way for how I move forward. So in the process of doing this excavation in Egypt and seeing how we focus on, male deities, we focus on Ra or Re, we focus on Asar, we focus on all of these, and Heru and Jehuti, Impu. But what I really have come to understand is that these male forces are forces that have dominion over the physical world, over Earth. But the cosmos, 99.999999999% of everything is all feminine. And that there's 3 feminine entities who have been written out of the equation. Why? Because we've been living the last 2,000 years with the mentality that's been dominated by a male dominated murder cult, that have centered us around a male concept of God, and have demonized the feminine. Even their own women they demonize. And so there are 3 very important personalities that I'm going to be talking about and writing about more over the course of the next decade or so. You mentioned Ma'at. And so Ma'at is foundational, right? I mentioned in Kemet, on the 40th day, the heart, which is the seat of the soul, is weighed opposite the feather Ma'at on the scale of Ma'at, as the soul is led into the hall of the double Ma'at, where they declare their innocence and recite the 42 declarations of innocence. And if their heart, the seat of the soul, is in balance, right, it's found Ma'at Keru, true of voice. So if your heart is as light as a feather, right, if you've lived a life in accordance with the 42 principles of Ma'at, then you can go on and reap your reward as an ancestor, and then prepare for your next incarnation, right, into the physical form. So Ma'at is the key. And Ma'at represents not just the universe, but the multiverse. All of the dimensions of everything that exists is Ma'at. It's this feminine force. And we have a better understanding of Ma'at in our galaxy, which is dominated by another feminine cosmic principle, and that is Nut. So typically when you hear people talk about Nut, they say that Nut is the sky. Well, what I learned in working on this excavation, Nut is more than the sky. Nut represents the Milky Way. Nut represents the portion of the sky that dominates our galaxy, our particular location within the Milky Way galaxy, which is just a pimple on the fingernail of Ma'at, right? It's a very, 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 very tiny spot. And so it's Nut, who is the wife of Geb, and Geb is depicted in the Kemetic cosmology as the earth. So in the Kemetic understanding, the earth is male, but the cosmos is female, right? And so it speaks to the fact that the earth represents the physical dominion, but all of the aspects of spirit in the cosmos are feminine, right? So we have Nut, and then there's a third component which very few people are aware of, and that is another sister by the name of Sheshet. And Sheshet is depicted as the scribe of the cosmos. And she is, there's an image that is carved on the back of the throne of the statue of Ramesses II in the second hypostyle hall of Luxor Temple. And, there's a space of less than 2 feet between the back of the statue and the wall. So you have to know that it's there, and you have to squeeze in that space to see this image. And I'll share with you all so that you can understand the concept that I'm talking about. And you see this image of Sheshet, who is dressed as a priestess, right? She's wearing a leopard skin garb, which is the attire of priests. But as most male priests who work at Karnak Temple or Luxor Temple, they will wear the same garment, but their garment has the spots of a leopard. Sheshet's garment has 5-pointed stars. So she's wrapped in the body of the cosmos, and she has a pen, and she's writing on a pawn frond and writing down the message or the teachings from Ma'at and Newt, and she's delivering those teachings to her husband. Her husband is Jehuti, who we refer to as the nature of the God of wisdom, of speech, of thought, right? And it's from the Greek interpretation, a misinterpretation of his name, Thoth, that we have derived the word thought. And so the act of thinking is associated with Jehuti, but Jehuti gets his knowledge from his wife, Sheshet. So she brought her knowledge down from the cosmos and gave it to her husband, who then gave it to mankind, right? And so the knowledge is really tamped down from a higher spiritual form to a lower physical form, and is given to man on earth to have dominion over earth. But it's really the sisters who run the show. And another important aspect of this imagery of Sheshet and her husband, Jehuti, is that typically on earth, when you see images of the pharaoh or the king, you see the king 5 times larger than his wife, larger than life size, and his wife is a small figure by his knee. You'll see that at the Temple of Abu Simbel, Temple of Ramesses II. These 4 65-foot high statues of Ramesses II, and you see his wife standing next to his knee, right? But when you see this image of Sheshet behind the statue of Ramesses II, you see Sheshet is taller than her husband, right? So in Kemet, the imagery, the symbolism, and the energy speaks legions. And in that regard, you know, we see Medu Neter and we understand what it is. It's words in pictures. And as the Chinese say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And if all your writing is in pictures, that means you're conveying multiple levels of consciousness simultaneously. And one has to be adequately prepared to interpret those symbols on multiple levels simultaneously. And that is what a real and profound understanding of Kemet really means when you examine it from an African-centered perspective and not looking at it as it has been reinterpreted by European Egyptologists, right? They get it bass backwards because they only have one small portion of the totality of the wisdom that is there. So we've got to free ourselves from the European interpretation of Egypt and understand Kemet through the eyes of indigenous African people. And that interpretation cannot be limited to Kemet because it really had its origins in Kush, which preceded Kemet by several hundreds of years, and Ethiopia, which preceded Kemet and Kush by thousands of years. So, you know, what I'm interested in doing is to try to free the minds of young people so that they can be the generation who will gain access to this deeper knowledge that is hidden and waiting for people with a free and a mind that has not been tainted by European indoctrination, a mind that will be accessible to those ancestors who are waiting for properly trained minds to receive the information which they have to impart to humanity. And when we cultivate those minds, we're ready to change the world.
And we're ready because that knowledge is being disseminated today, has been for the last 40 to 50 years I'm aware of. And it's so exciting because now we have so many scholars who are African, who are interpreting the glyphs from our cultural frame. And so it's just a beautiful thing. The knowledge is being dropped. Quickly, I just want to turn to Dr. Linder, who has not had a chance to say anything.
I was just thinking while you were speaking, Professor Browder, about that whole divine feminine versus the masculine, and I was wondering if you think as I imagine sometimes that it has to do with the Western tendency to understand the universe by dichotomizing things and seeing things as either or rather than both and you know a lot of the things that you describe, as you describe them, I'm seeing them as two aspects of one continuum, as opposed to two separate things, one of which is dominant over the other. And I think that's important for us to bring to light and remind our listeners of. So do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think an excellent example to illustrate that point is Guillermo del Toro's latest film, Frankenstein. You also watch that film. It's a powerful film. And what he's done in telling the story of Mary Shelley, Frankenstein, is Mary Shelley wrote two versions of Frankenstein. And so what he did was to extract elements from both versions of a story and then added some other elements to make it more engaging. But the essence of Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, is to deal with the fragile white male ego. White men have always been envious of women's capacity to produce life. So the whole story of Frankenstein is a story about the white male desire to create life, right? And what is important is to look at the original story of Frankenstein. The book Frankenstein is dramatically different from the 1930s Frankenstein film with Boris Karloff. That film so distorted the original intent of the book. But what's also interesting is the telltale sign in that original film that was edited out of its cinematic release because the censors wouldn't allow the scene where Dr. Frankenstein finally animates his monster with lightning, and then he says, "It's alive, it's alive, I am God." Right? They edited out that scene. And so it's the white man's attempt to be God that has been the source of all of the problem. And so he sees everything as either or good or evil, God and the devil, when in fact, God and the devil are two sides of the same coin, right? It's all relative. So, we have to have the courage to do what Carter G. Woodson did and get the white man out of our heads and embrace our ancestors who have always been there, who are in our DNA and are waiting for us to be still and acknowledge them, to pour libation and invite them to come forth and be a part of our lives. And to the extent to which we're able to do that is the extent to which we're free. And the last point I'll make is because I love film, I love analyzing film, and it's important to understand how ancestors or spirit expresses itself through films. And one of the best examples of that is the work of Ryan Coogler. I've got two essays in my book that discuss Ryan Coogler and his work and how the ancestors have been using him as a vehicle to make certain spiritual knowledge palatable to those within our communities who are prepared to receive it. And so if you look at his film Sinners, which was a love story to his Uncle James, who died while he was editing the film about Rocky, Creed, while he was editing Creed. So Sinners is his love story to his Uncle James that talks about the blues music and their struggles in Mississippi. And the most telling part of that film is the juke joint scene where Sammy does his breakout performance, and he literally becomes an instrument that calls down the ancestors into the juke joint. And that scene is one of the most powerful cinematic scenes ever produced. And we saw these ancestors. We saw Sammy call down the ancestors. And as I've analyzed that scene, if you recall, the film, a lot of people get sidetracked when they say it's a film about vampires. No, it's not a film about literal vampires. It's about symbolic vampires, the racist American system, which sucks the blood and the labor of all people, specifically African people. And what you see in that film, vampires just can't come into your house. You have to invite them into the house, right? You have to give them an opening and they come in. So if you examine Sammy singing his song, I Lied to You, talking about the dichotomy between secular music and sacred music, his father and the juke joint, right? There's that dichotomy again. And so he had to lie to his father in order to be his authentic self. And the hook to that song is somebody take me in your arms tonight. He's extending that invitation to the ancestors to come and take him in his arms. And so he opens up that portal and the ancestors pour down and they take everybody. We see everybody's ancestors in that room. That's the power of African spirit. And that's what Remick, the lead vampire, saw. And he said, I need that power. I don't have it, but I need to get it from you so that I can call down my ancestors, right? And run this show again. So that's what this whole thing is about. And Ryan Coogler very skillfully depicted that in this so-called horror film. And he got, $100 million from Paramount to do that. He owns the rights to that film in 25 years. He's done what very few producers have been able to do. And as a consequence of him being open to spirit, open to his ancestors, and more specifically, open to the spirit of his uncle James, and produced this film, which was nominated for 16 Academy Awards. No film in the 97-year history of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences has ever been nominated for 16 Oscars. So that's Ryan Coogler allowing himself to be a vessel through which the spirit of his ancestors are working in real time. Right? We need to see that, we need to acknowledge that, and we need to realize that Ryan Coogler is showing us who we are. He's showing us what we have always had the power to do. And to the extent to which we are open and receptive to that is the extent to which our ancestors will take us in their arms and empower us and protect us as America goes down the tubes.
There's so many ways they do that now, and there's so many ways we can access them really quickly because we're running out of time. Colin, did you have anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, this has been a great conversation. I want to tie in. I've been hearing a lot about spirituality, and you were just talking about movies, Dr. Browder, and a lot of the conversation has centered around ancestors. I just want to plug a movie that's just came out. It's Moses the Black. Omar Epps is starring in it. I think it's another in that tradition that we've seen build lately of Black of filmmakers taking on some of our ancestors and what they've done in the spiritual realm. I also just wanted to say earlier, you were making a comment about Dr. Woodson, and you were talking about how he had to unlearn so much of what he learned at Harvard. And I'm reminded, because I am, again, a grad student in counseling, that this past semester, I did a presentation on OCT, on optimal conceptual theory. And one of the key principles there, Nana Linda James Myers, as you know better than anybody on this call, is that belief systems analysis, where you look at that existing worldview and you really have to unlearn so much before you even get into that posture of being prepared to truly heal folks of our ancestry. Also, I appreciate your breakdown of the etymology of genius. I never heard that before in terms of where that term is derived, and so that was powerful. There's 3 ancestors that I want to plug before we go that I've been meditating on in this conversation. You mentioned Dr. Charles Sumner Finch. When I look at that middle name, I wonder, is that Sumner deriving from our first Black psychologist, that is Dr. Francis Cecil Sumner? That's number one, just for food for thought.
So wait, let me back up. So
go ahead.
It's Charles Sumner Finch the third.
The third, okay.
And his father was a psychiatrist in the military. So I'll see Charles's wife, Ellen, this weekend in Atlanta. I'll ask her.
Okay. So then the other one is Richard Smallwood. I'm meditating on his life. And then also Gladys West. Gladys West was a mathematician. She went to Virginia State at HBCU in Virginia. She also got her doctorate from Virginia Tech. But she was a Black woman mathematician who was central, a forerunner in what we now know as GPS. Her work formed the basis for GPS. So our ability to get from point A to point B, this generation taking that for granted is definitely something that we can say rest on her shoulders. The last thing is I just wanted to encourage a question, and that is you said something earlier, Dr. Browder, that I'm sure probably struck many people, and that is you said we don't have to struggle.
Yeah.
And when you said that, I was reminded of Mr. Frederick Douglass, who said, if there is no struggle, there is no progress. So I'm curious what you think about that. And I'm also curious if you could sum up, because I didn't take that African spirituality class that you took, and there's been a lot that you've dumped into this particular segment on African spirituality. If somebody didn't take that class that you took from, I believe it was a Ghanaian brother, where should we start to try to understand more about African spirituality?
Sure. Well, let me ask you one question before I answer your question. What was the name of the brother who you said was the first Black psychiatrist?
So the first Black psychiatrist was Solomon Carter Fuller, but the first Black psychologist that I'm aware of is Francis Cecil Sumner. He got his degree from Clark up in Massachusetts.
And this is such a beautiful panel, wonderful conversation. We haven't had time to ask the audience. I don't know if we have comments from them, but we're going to just have to have you come back and answer these many questions because we're out of time today. But
we're sorry to dump that on you, Dan.
No. I'm sure everybody has the questions, and there's so much. I just want people to know everything that Mr. Browder has shared today is pouring out. This is the age.
Absolutely.
This knowledge, spirituality is everywhere. It's pouring out. And the key, I think, that everyone can use is go within. It's within you. The knowledge, wisdom, and understanding resides within you. And we have mechanisms to support you to access that. So, Dr. Jojo, you're run of show. Do we have time for one question from the audience?
This is so good, y'all. Let me see here. Not a lot of questions. Well, somebody asked on Instagram, anywhere we can access papers on OCT. I plug the Journal of Black Psychology, Nana Linder. And then we just have a lot of great comments from people just appreciating the conversation. So enrichments for mind and spirit and enlightenment, embrace our ancestors who are our entourage. Thanks so much for your spiritual awareness. Just summing up, some of our conversation. Powerful panel. Thank you so much. This is great. Dr. Pepper's also from the DC ABPsi. I think she said, thank you for this. Thank you all. Eddie from the DC ABPsi says, you can get lost in combo chatting it out with Professor Browder. No cap. So, he's a member of DC ABPsi, so we're just going to shamelessly, come back, Professor Browder. But just people loving the conversation.
And, it was beautiful to see that people are just so eager because this is the time. And we have methodologies. Optimal conceptual theory is a methodology. And we have within that the heart feather strategy, which is also a methodology. So much is extant out there. And so we're so happy our audience is joining us so we can partake in these beautiful conversations. And it's now a bit after. I guess I can give Dr. Browder closing word. Okay. Maybe that word should be, will you please come back?
Well, look, you all got me hooked. So Dr. JJ knows she can call me and I'll come forward. But excellent. I want to speak to what the question very briefly that Colin raised about Frederick Douglass, where there's no struggle, there's no progress. That was a mindset at that time when we were enslaved, when we did believe that we had to struggle, when we did believe that we had to pray to the white man's concept of God to liberate us. But we're free from that now. We don't have to do that. We we are the source. We have a connection to the creator. So when you know that the creator expresses itself through you, so it's a matter of refining the mind so that you can refine your ask, and you get what you pay for. So in the larger sense of, in the larger scheme of things, when you really understand how this multiverse works, it ain't a universe, it's a multiverse, and how it works, you get what you put out there. That's ma'at. That's reciprocity. So be careful of the thought seeds you plant in the garden of your mind, for seeds grow after their kind. Every thought felt is true or allowed to be accepted as true by your conscious mind takes root in your subconscious mind and blossoms sooner or later into an act and bears its own fruit. So when you think right, when you know who you are and you know how to channel your thoughts, then you tap into an unlimited reservoir of power that amplifies every single one of your thoughts. So in that context, there's training that one has to go through in order to do that. And as Asa made a point to bring out in his lectures and talking about Nile Valley education, one had to be trained for 42 years before you were qualified to open your mouth. Nowadays, people read one book and pass them and get a podcast and pass themselves out off as an expert. So most folk need to do less talking and more listening, and listen to elders, right? Listen to folk who have walked the walk and know the difference between foolishness, nonsense, and good sense. And it's about humbling yourself and listening to those ancestors who have always been there to guide you and direct you. And you know, and I'll stop on this because, as you all know, I can talk forever. But we all have ancestors who know us and who we know, who love us and who we love. And when you can identify who that ancestor is, for me, it's my grandmother. I mean, I can call my grandmother and I know that whatever I get from her is rock solid. Everybody has that ancestral connection. And when you cultivate that connection, when you enhance what I refer to as your ancestral intelligence, that's the only AI that we should be concerned with. As you strengthen that bond, you then become a conduit through which your ancestors will live, speak, and do their best work. That's who we have always been. So, and when you're tapped in on that level, you don't have to struggle. All you have to do is do. What do I want to create today? The physical world is the dominion of creators. We're here to create, and the ancestral power allows us to create. So what do you want to create? You want to create heaven or you want to create hell? It's your decision. So with that, I thank you all very much for this time, and it's always an honor and a pleasure.
Likewise, thank you so very much. And you know that divine spirit force, it's here, it's in you, you're within it. The communication channels are open. So we give praises and thanks. Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you the next time.
Okay, take care, and everybody be warm and be safe.